Kings and Queens, your majesties, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for returning. Trust you and yours are well. And you're loving yourself and others like always. Many thanks to all of you for the support you give to the channel. Thank you so much to our channel members, to our anonymous supporters, to all of you, my esteemed subscribers. You're loved, celebrated, and of course appreciated. So I believe some of you are aware about the nuclear partnership between Russia and Niger. Remember when the love between France and Niger became sour? Niger needed another sovereign power who is interested in their uranium to come purchase. Of course, they need the money for development as well. And there we had Russia. Russia came in, and I believe some of you will say, "Oh yeah, that's expected because Russia was one of the sovereign powers that had been aiding the Sahel, especially to become independent." And I told you what the Sahel leaders said, even when the West had accused the Sahel of leaving them and working with Russia. They said that they prefer to work with a sovereign power that is fair. Because the love between Europe and the Sahel was the love between the slave and the master. And that they were tired of that kind of relationship. They want a relationship that they can also be equal as well. And that was what Russia presented to the Sahel, and they work with it. Now, some Africans believe that that particular partnership between Russia and Niger would change the story of Africa forever. And if this between Russia and Niger pays, a lot would change for the better. I want us to listen to the investigative journalist, David Yundei, and we take it off from there, Your Majesties.
Russia's ambitions in Africa have just taken a striking leap forward, eyeing the vast uranium riches of Niger.
Except it's not as simple as eyeing the vast mineral riches of Niger. In this case, something is happening that represents a brand new model for foreign investments and international economic partnership with Africa. Having signed a memorandum of understanding with Niger in July for cooperation in the development of peaceful nuclear energy, Russia has submitted an official proposal to build a nuclear reactor in Niger, which will be the country's first ever nuclear reactor and only Africa's second functioning nuclear reactor. Here's some context to understand why this is such a big deal for Niger and for Africa. So Niger has been exporting uranium from its existing 3 uranium mines since 1971. Until 2023, all 3 mines were controlled by French companies, with the bulk of Niger's uranium production going to France. Now, roughly 77% of France's electricity comes from nuclear power, which it generates using uranium. As of 2022, Niger was France's second largest uranium supplier, and this is roughly how much electricity is consumed in France annually. So it's fair to say that a double-digit percentage of France's electricity supply was for many years directly dependent on Nigerian uranium. Now, compare the figures you just saw with the equivalent figures for Niger. Do you see the problem here? Since the end of World War II, France has built itself a roaring $3 trillion economy, powered overwhelmingly by nuclear power, whose fuel comes from a place that barely has any power at all. In the 42 years that France mined uranium in Niger, it never occurred to the French that a country with a population equivalent to 40% of France and landmass double the size of France might need electricity for its people or might have ambitions of its own. In fact, the only time the French public even became aware that a significant fraction of their energy mix was coming out of one of the poorest and least electrified places on Earth was after the 2023 coup, and even then, it was only in this context. How did it affect France? How does it affect us? Niger and its 27 million inhabitants, we doubt. So with this context, you can understand why Russia's proposal is nothing short of groundbreaking. The French way of doing business in Africa was the empire's classic MO. Invest only in mining and evacuation infrastructure, pay locals peanuts to do unskilled, labor-intensive jobs, get the desired natural resources out of the ground and onto trains and trucks heading to the ports as quickly as possible, ensure there's zero localization of the value chain, and generally make sure as little economic benefit as possible accrues to the locals. In fact, the French extracted uranium so efficiently from Niger that they actually exhausted 2 of those 3 mines, all the while making sure that Niger was benefiting as little as possible from all the wealth that it was giving up. The Russian proposal turns this paradigm on its head. Rather than a one-sided extractive relationship, where for some reason one side must be poor and miserable for the other side to be wealthy, both sides are presented with a genuine win-win scenario. Russia gets to develop an important new source of nuclear fuel for its own nuclear program, and then instead of just paying Niger money, which would simply lock Niger even further into import dependency and poverty, Niger instead gets game-changing energy infrastructure. Allows the country potentially to explore the value chain of its own uranium. That's more than just teaching a man how to fish. That's giving him the tools and knowledge required to build his own fishing trawler. And it will be an excellent rebuttal to the empire's fundamentally false notion. It is acceptable and sustainable that, despite not having a single deposit of uranium anywhere in France, Paris gets to be called the City of Lights due to cheap nuclear energy, while the place where the nuclear fuel actually comes from gets to look like this. Thank goodness for multipolarity.
That was funny towards the end. The City of Lights. So where is their light coming from? Their light was coming from the City of Darkness. Your Majesties. That was a bit hilarious. Because if France was seen as the City of Light, and where they were getting their light from was perpetually living in darkness, then something definitely is wrong between that kind of relationship. Now, the fact that blew my mind was when he said the French citizens didn't even know that where their uranium was coming from was a very poor third world country until 2023. So they got to know that their uranium was coming from that part of the world where they whenever they think about, they say, ish. You know, that part of the world, whenever they see on their TV screen, they say, oh my goodness, what is this? Does this place exist on the planet Earth? That is the part of the world where their uranium were coming from. They never expected that their uranium was coming from the poorest region in the world. And I keep telling you here, the Sahel is not poor. The Sahel was made poor. It was the doing of man that made the Sahel poor. Okay? And that is how the world operates. Any part of the world where they tag as poor, just know that something special is in that region. There is something beautiful in that region that is being harnessed and taken away. So the citizens, the originals of that land, cannot even enjoy their God-given resources because of wicked people that we have in this world that claim to be in charge of world powers. It's unfortunate. Now, you see the kind of relationship that Africa has with the West. You now see the reason why the moment an African country that is really woken, that had truly cut off from imperialism, you know, colonialism and the rest of them, the moment an African country had realized her potentials, they cut off from Europe and America totally, and they embrace other sovereign powers. Because tell me, how can I be giving you light 247 and I be in perpetual darkness? How? And all thanks to the sellouts that we have as leaders, as presidents in countries in Africa. Because Niger had a president, Bazoum. He was in power when all this was happening. People were suffering. Terrorism was in the rise. The economy was something else. And he was okay with it. And when all these things were happening, African Union didn't say anything serious. The United Nations didn't say anything serious. ECOWAS didn't say anything serious. And the moment these people began to source for their own freedom by themselves, like they took their salvation by the hand, all this union began to talk. But prior to that time, they were so dumb, like they had no mouth. And that is exactly what we are seeing in Madagascar today. That when the situation was going on, the unions that should say something didn't say anything. The unions that should do something didn't do anything. And the moment the military took over, the union began to act. The union began to shake. Is this not hypocrisy? If it is not hypocrisy, then tell me what it is. Anyway, I felt like showing this to you today.
The United States just told all Americans in Mali to get out now. This is what the embassy has just put online, as Al-Qaeda-linked insurgents have been blocking fuel imports into the country since September, and right now there's a major shortage of fuel. These terrorists in the country are attacking fuel convoys going in and out, and they're telling people, if you need to evacuate, try to get on a plane as soon as possible. Don't try to drive, because once again, they're attacking fuel economies and they're attacking other kinds of modes of transportation. And the situation there is falling apart quickly. We're at a moment now where the government just shut down schools and universities nationwide for at least 2 weeks because of this. And so the US Embassy right now is saying the situation is quote unquote too unpredictable, and that they're telling citizens, US citizens, to leave immediately on commercial flights while the airports are still open. Yes, they're worried there's not going to be enough fuel for planes. And the embassy website has a whole list of things that you should be doing right now. Number one being you should leave the country. But they say to U.S. citizens who choose to not depart, they should prepare for contingency plans for any emergency situations that may arise, including a need to shelter in place for an extended period. And I need to stress, they're saying do not drive. Fly, because it may not be safe for travel due to terrorist attacks along national highways.
Leave your thoughts and opinion there at the section. I'm going to see you in my next one. Until then, love yourself, love others, stay safe, stay positive, always your majesties. Bye for now.